Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're taking on a massive goal. We're going to untangle one of the most misunderstood and, frankly, weaponized words in real estate and law. I'm talking about the word equity. If you've ever looked into property rights, trusts, or maybe even foreclosure defense, well, you've probably heard this term thrown around like a get-out-of-jail-free card. But what does it actually mean? We really need to figure out exactly where the wild internet mythology ends and the cold, hard legal reality begins. Okay, to show you what we're up against, look at this wild, fake law claim right off the bat. Equity means fairness, so the court must side with me. You wouldn't believe how often this comes up. People routinely and completely mistakenly think equity is this emotional magic wand. They think it automatically overrides actual written contracts, formal deeds, and strict statutes just because a situation, feels unfair. Okay, let's dive into this. Is equity actually a magic word? Can someone really just stand up, declare they have an equitable interest, and suddenly control a piece of property without showing a shred of actual title or authority? Well, spoiler alert, no way. To really get this, we've got to step away from all the internet mythology and step into the structured, evidence-based reality of how property ownership actually works in the eyes of the law. Here's our roadmap for this explainer so we can systematically dissect all these layers. 1. The mythology. 2. Legal title versus equitable interest. 3. Trusts as the perfect example. 4. Financial equity confusion. 5. Real-world property battles. And finally, 6. Debunking fake law abuses. All right, starting with Section 1, the mythology, or basically what equity is not. So before we can nail down exactly what equity is, we've got to set up some guardrails by clearing out the really dangerous misinformation you see in a lot of sovereign and fake law spaces online. Look, equity is not magic. It's not just fairness in some loose, everyday emotional sense. It is absolutely 100% not an excuse to just ignore statutes, written contracts, court rules, or recording deadlines. It doesn't mean, hey, I feel like this is mine because my situation is tough. And it certainly does not give you unlimited control without any proof. The reality? Real equity works through established facts, recognized rights, and proper legal procedure. It doesn't mean the public record just simply ceases to matter. Moving right along to Section 2, legal title versus equitable interest. This brings us right to the core anatomy of ownership. To really grasp property law, we have to stop making this dangerous mistake of collapsing all property rights into one single vague bucket called ownership. Because ownership is layered, kind of like a giant puzzle. On one side, you have legal title. That's the formal, officially recognized control of a property that lives right there in the public record. Think warranty deeds, court orders, the formal stuff a title search actually finds. Then, entirely distinct from that, you have equitable interest. This is a beneficial, fairness-based right that's enforceable in equity. Here's the absolute crucial takeaway for us. Having an equitable interest does not mean you have automatic legal control. You can hold a beneficial interest in a property without actually having the formal legal title required to, say, sign a deed or sell the place. Which brings us perfectly to Section 3, trusts. The absolute cleanest place to teach this. As our source material points out, trusts are the cleanest place to see this separation in action, and this brilliantly illustrates that exact point. Just imagine a mother sets up a trust for her kids and puts a rental property inside it, okay? The trustee is the one holding the legal title. They're doing all the heavy lifting. They manage the property, lease it out, fix the leaky roof, and administer everything subject to some very strict legal duties. On the flip side, the kids, as beneficiaries, hold the equitable interest. They get to actually receive the benefit or the income from that property. See what happened there? The trustee's legal control is completely severed from the children's beneficial interest. Those kids can't just wake up on a Tuesday, sign a deed, and sell the house. They benefit from the property, sure, but they don't legally control it. That is a highly structured legal division of title and benefit. It is not mythology. Let's hit Section 4, financial equity confusion. Let's take a quick cognitive break here with a very concrete concept, one that people confuse all the time, financial equity. Let's look at some simple math. Say you've got a property valued at $300,000, but you've got a secured debt on it, like a standard mortgage, for $180,000. Basic math tells us the difference there is $120,000. That $120,000, that is your financial equity. But here's the fascinating catch. Financial equity is literally just math. It is not a magical legal shield. Having $120,000 in financial equity sitting there doesn't erase your mortgage, and it certainly won't magically stop a bank from foreclosing if you stop making your payments. Now, don't get me wrong, financial equity absolutely matters. It's incredibly important for things like claiming surplus funds after a tax sale or navigating a bankruptcy. But it is entirely, fundamentally different from holding an equitable title or interest in a property. We just can't afford to mix those two concepts up. Moving into Section 5, Real-World Property Battles. Let's step out of the theory for a second and look at how these distinct legal layers play out in high-stakes, real-world courtroom battles. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how a constructive trust is actually created. By definition, a constructive trust is an equitable remedy imposed by a court to prevent unjust enrichment. So imagine a scenario where someone snagged a property through fraud or some kind of wrongful conduct. The court steps in. But here's the kicker, and pay close attention to this. It is an order coming directly from a judge based on rock-solid proof of wrongdoing. It is emphatically not something you just magically create yourself by scribbling constructive trust on some private paperwork and dropping it in the mail. And we see that exact same logic applied to what's called an equitable lien. Again, this is a court-imposed remedy. It recognizes a fairness-based claim against a property, but it's completely distinct from a standard statutory or recorded mortgage. We really need to dispel this dangerous myth floating around online that individuals can just, invent enforceable equitable liens against properties by filing their own unsupported DIY documents. Real equity simply doesn't work just by declaring it out loud. So, what does the path of real equity actually look like? Well, it's a very strict procedural reality. Step 1, you must actually prove the facts and relationships, like proving unjust enrichment or a breach of fiduciary duty. Step 2, you have to file the proper legal pleading and actually follow the rules of procedure. Step 3, you must establish the court's jurisdiction and prove your own standing to sue. And finally, Step 4, if and only if all of that is met, the court might grant you a remedy. Equity demands timely action, it demands clean hands, and it demands hard evidence. You definitely can't just stroll into a courtroom, complain to a judge about how unfair things are, and expect to walk out holding a shiny new deed. Let's wrap things up with Section 6, Debunking Fake Law Abuses. It's time to bring this all together with a rapid-fire takedown of the fake law abuses running totally rampant online and, unfortunately, in our courts. Myth number 1, equity means fairness, so I automatically win. Reality? Nope. Legal equity requires hard facts, a solid legal basis, and strict procedure. Myth 2, equitable interest equals total control. Reality? Absolutely false. Like we saw with the trust example, beneficiaries have an interest, sure, but there's no way they can just go around signing deeds. Myth 3, equity overrides all statutes. Reality? False again. Equity supplements the law. It doesn't magically erase your recording deadlines or your state's foreclosure procedures. And myth 4, putting a property in a trust blocks all liens. Reality? Completely false. Trust property is absolutely still subject to taxes and creditor claims. The ultimate rule of this entire explainer, equity follows proof. It never follows mythology. As we close out, I want to leave you with a provocative thought to critically evaluate regarding your own life. If you own your home, which layer of ownership do you actually hold right now? Are you holding the formal legal title out there on the public record? Do you hold an equitable interest through a contract or maybe a trust? Or do you just have some financial equity sitting alongside a really heavy mortgage? I highly encourage you to take a hard look at your own property rights, deeds, and mortgages based on the fascinating layers we just uncovered today. Because when you truly grasp the structured anatomy of ownership, you empower yourself with real actionable knowledge. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.